you back there? We're going to call a meeting of the Board of Supervisors back to order. It's just after, it's 1:31 p.m. We're still in the Sierra Room at City Hall. We're on item number 28. These 28A and 28B are appointment matters. We're going to take up 28 Alpha first. This is to appoint 2 members of the Carson City Open Space Advisory Committee, each for a term that expires January 2023. We have 2 people, Bruce Scott and Alan Welch, applying for reappointment, and new applications were received from Adam Woodrum and John Fry. So we'll interview, and we have Mr. Scott here. Bruce, come on up. How you doing today?
Thank you. And actually, Adam decided to pull his application, so he won't be here.
All right. I'm the 10% guy today. Didn't get the message. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
Hey, you've done such a wonderful job on the Open Space Committee. You want to continue on?
That's my request. And I realize that, that puts you guys in a tough position, and I respect whatever you decide. But I would love to have an opportunity to continue on it one more term. We've got a great committee. Things are beginning to really, I think, come along pretty well, and I would love to be a part of it.
Well, big deals on the Ham property and the property we just acquired this morning, or going to acquire. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff. And you were part of the original Question 18 folks, weren't you?
Yes, Your Honor.
I heard that. Got my vote.
No,
That's good.
I was. I was involved, have been involved from helping with Question 18 to today.
Been one of the best things that's happened to this city. Thanks.
It's been wonderful.
All right. All right, Stacy, you probably see how we do this?
Yeah, I guess
You
I'll go
wanna
first,
start off,
or
and then
second.
we'll go like this. That's right.
So Bruce, just tell me in your mind how you sort of evaluate, with the limited funds we have, spending money on new acquisitions versus managing existing open space.
It's always a challenge. We have made it real clear to the community in our public meetings and to this board that we see open space moving towards operations and maintenance as opposed to more completely focused on acquisition. With that being said, every once in a while something comes up that is an important piece of the puzzle. And so I really see us moving more towards maintenance and planning and execution, some of the detail kind of stuff, signage and some of the important things that are part of managing open space. But the acquisition we spoke about this morning, the Fagan one, there's 2 or 3 others out there, the Ham one, the Clear Creek, which may be coming forward depending on how things unfold there, are important pieces of open space as it relates to some of the linkages and some of the trail system. And of course, we see the trail system as valuable from an open space perspective, but we also see it as valuable from a economic development perspective and from a resource perspective. So I think we're tapering the way I see it on the acquisitions, but I wouldn't tell you there wouldn't be any requests. With that being said, we've heard loud and clear concerns about spending our money on land when we should be doing more management. And we try very hard and will continue to try very hard to bring grants to the table to reduce the acquisition cost of anything that might come forward from the committee.
Thank you.
Hi, Bruce.
Good afternoon.
Your comments on land acquisition versus management goes to one of my 2 questions. In the 2017, the winter of 2017, we had significant damage to our trails from the winter runoff, the snow runoff, and we didn't have money to go in and repair the trails. So over a period of time now, we're trying to tackle that and get those trails back into order so that they can be used. So take your previous comments and take that a step further. How do we balance retaining enough money in, say, a rainy day fund, no pun intended, to repair our trails versus land acquisition and doing the linkages between trails. I mean, how do you balance that? And then if you want, you can wander off into the aquatic trail and how we're going to actually build that.
Okay. Of course, the floods in 2017 were pretty significant. And many of our trails are just tracks that have become trails. They're not necessarily designed to handle runoff very well. We have done some work in the past, Golden Eagle Lane area, and that sort of thing to stabilize. I think that kind of thing is an ongoing effort. I think having a rainy day fund or having a reserve is definitely a goal that we probably should strive towards, but I really see that as a little ways away because we've got more short-term needs right now, I think, than we have money for. With that being said, between parks, open space, public works, streets, the utilities, all of them have been helping in some of these more emergency type situations. And I think a lot of it's going to be prioritizing and then hitting them as we can and trying to not just regrade it so it can happen again, but actually solve the problems with some solutions. And unfortunately, those are going to cost more than sending a blade out there to clean up Deer Run Road, just south of the Deer Run Road bridge there, like we're having to do now. So I see it as a process. At the same time, we are understaffed, although that is gradually changing, and our committee's been pretty conservative about recommendations for staff to this board, but we are improving the staff. We have some really top-notch staff people, and we really want to continue the process of having them able to manage volunteers, manage small contracts for contractors or for consultants or others. So I think we're making good progress, but it's a pretty step-by-step process. It's going to take a while, but I'm real pleased with the progress that's been made.
Good afternoon. What new ideas or changes would you propose for this committee if appointed?
That's interesting. Trying to think outside the box, I think, is important for our committee, and we're fortunate to have a very diverse group of committee members. And so what we've found is a lot of the good ideas are really coming up from committee members who happen to be involved in one area of the community or another activity. One of the things I would like to do that we haven't done much of is get a little bit closer to some of the kinds of things that open space is beginning to bring on. The epic bicycle race, for example. We're going to be careful or we're going to love our open space to death. And so that's an area that I think we need to try to get out ahead of so that we can accommodate some things that might be very good for Carson City and very good for economic development, but at the same time recognize the limitations on the resource. So that would be one area.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some time back, the Parks and Recreation Department and Open Space Department came to us with a proposal that the committees for Parks and Rec and for Open Space be merged. A good compromise was found in the sense that you meet twice a year in joint meetings, as I understand it. But at that time, I raised the question of whether there should be a board member on both rather than a BOS member on both, or just there's only one on Parks but not on Open Space. How do you feel about that? Would you feel it would be good to have a board member on the Open Space Committee as well for liaison purposes, or are you opposed to that?
Well, I felt that what was worked out with the proposal to merge the two committees was a good compromise. Frankly, I had concern about merging the two committees. Our committee is working quite well the way it is now, but I really view the addition of a board member to our committee as something that's entirely within the purview of this board. And frankly, if you chose to do that, we would welcome them with open arms and make sure they did their homework.
I see the emphasis on the last part there.
Yeah, we've expected, and our committee has stepped up to come prepared and be a part of this. It's not just because we only meet every couple of months, and there's a lot going on. And so we've had subcommittee, I shouldn't say that. We've had working groups. We've had other things that have been tasked with trying to keep things moving while we're between meetings. And frankly, our committee has really responded to the call to do your homework and come prepared.
Anything you want to add, Mr. Scott?
All I would add is I very much appreciate the opportunity I've had to work on this committee and to be a part of it. It's very important to me as a resident of Carson City. I would love to have your favorable consideration, and I respect the decision that you might choose to make. So, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Well, I think I speak for all of us. We want to thank you for your service on this board. I don't know how it's going to come out, but I suspect I know, or I think I do anyway, because you're asking for reappointment. But, you know, independent of anything else, the Open Space Board has done wonders for this community since it was created, you know, way back in 1996. You know, we want to say thank you for all the hard work that you guys put in. I know, you know, we just tease a little bit about doing your homework, but it really is one of these ones where you're kind of involved not only in planning, maintenance, acquisition, grants, you know, the whole 9 yards of development issues. So our hat's off to you.
I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor and members of the board. I will tell you one thing, is that we try very hard not to bring things to you without a thorough vetting and solid recommendations. We are not, as I see it, an advisory committee to simply kick it upstairs and let you guys deal with it. We expect to give you our opinion and for you to make your decision based on that plus whatever else you have in your consideration.
Okay, good. You're welcome. You know, you're welcome to hang around. Okay. Anybody else got any questions? Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Welch. How you doing, Alan?
Good. Here?
Yeah, come on up. Doing all right today?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I know I read your resume, you know, and it's a pretty good resume, but I wanted to tell you, you're killing a lot of trees with your resume and all the things that you've done and written, so maybe you ought to think about that next time. I'm kidding you. You've got a lot of writings, man, a lot of writings. So, one, we want to thank you for your service on the Open Space Board, and I'd like to ask you, one, why do you want to get reappointed, and what's your vision for the board in the near term and far term?
I'd like to continue serving because, you know, frankly, it takes you a few years to understand, even though you think you know what you're getting into, what you really are getting into and what the issues are. One of the things that I'd really like to continue working on is helping with moving the conservation easement for the Old Woods Ranch and helping out with liaising between the family and the committee. So that's one thing that I feel strongly about. I really hope we can move ahead with additional connectedness, both between Douglas County and Carson City, as well as with the Capital to Tahoe Trail. So the trail connectedness is one of my big concerns. Also like to move ahead with management plan for Silver Saddle Ranch. I think that's something we need to start getting out in front of before we have something happen that we don't know how to react to.
Okay. Stacy.
Alan, thanks for your application and your service so far. Tell me, in your mind, how do you sort of balance the limited funds and make a decision between land acquisition and management of existing open space?
terms of acquisition, I think the one that you voted on this morning is a good example. It's unfortunate that we had to use all our own money to purchase it, but I think there was a really concerted effort to try and find other alternatives so we could take our money and, in some cases, double or even more than that with grants. And so I'd like to see that effort continue as we think about acquisitions. But to me, the issue of acquisition should be looking back at our UPMP as well as our master plan and say, does this fit in with what we're planning to do? And if it doesn't, I think we need to take a much more critical view of any acquisitions. I don't think we should be acquiring land just to acquire land. We need to acquire land for a purpose such as, in particular, connectedness. So we absolutely need to spend some time thinking about and figuring out how to manage our lands, but there are times and opportunities where I think acquisition makes sense so that we can have a well-connected trail system.
Hello, Alan. Following up on Stacy's question about how you balance acquisition versus maintenance, give me your thoughts on how and when we ensure that we have enough reserve funds for trail maintenance. If you think back to winter of 2017 and all the damage that was done to the trails from the snow runoff. And then if you have time and you're so inclined, give me your thoughts on the Carson Aquatic Trail and how and when we build that.
Well, we'll start with the aquatic trail. We've been able to, in part, take advantage of public works funds for building launch facilities. So I'd like to see that we continue that so that we use additional funds besides just open space to move ahead with that. I'm sorry, what was your first question?
Tell me your thoughts on how and when we ensure that we have enough money set aside for maintenance of trails.
Okay, on maintenance of trails, first, I'm sure that you know that Muscle Powered has an MOU with the city to take care of maintaining the trails. And so much of that work is actually volunteer, and it's really only supported or primarily supported by the city through purchase of equipment. So right now, and additionally, most of the trails are quite sustainable. We had the big runoff event, as you mentioned, but for instance, the trails on the Ham property didn't require any additional maintenance. So to me, the issue is when we build a trail or when we rehabilitate a trail, we make it so it's sustainable so we don't have that issue.
Good afternoon, Alan. Okay. What new ideas or changes would you propose if appointed to this position?
I was reading the master plan the other day to prepare for this meeting, and in that plan there was a statement that it would be revised every 5 to 7 years, and that was when it was originally written. I don't think we need to go through that whole plan for the purpose of doing that, but I would like to see another set of goals. In the plan, there was 2 or 3 pages that said, okay, in the next 5 to 7 years, this is what we want to accomplish. I would like to see us revisit that small part of the plan and say, what are our goals? In a way perhaps similar to what the library is starting to do now, is say, if we have public input, what would you like us to do differently or more or less? So we have a set of goals that we can work towards.
Recently, or rather recently, the proposal came before us to merge the Parks and Rec Committee with the Open Space Committee, make it one. And a compromise was worked out, and I know you guys now meet a couple times a year in joint meetings. But one of the units, the Parks and Rec, has a board member serving on it, Lori currently, but nobody from this board serves on open space. How do you feel about having a board member on the open space committee, for it or against it?
I don't see any reason to not have a member of the board. That person might be frustrated because it's an advisory committee. And things take a long time, as you noticed with our land acquisition. I mean, sometimes on this committee, I'm reminded of, I think it was Mark Twain said, the reason for eternity is so we can learn German. And so sometimes the rate at which things happen, it can be a little bit frustrating, but I don't see any reason why if somebody wanted to sit around and help us learn German, they wouldn't be able to.
My father was Irish, and yet he grew up in Davenport, Iowa, and was fluent in German. He said it was the most precise language of all. I suspect that's why it takes so long to learn it.
Alan, anything you want to add? Any
No,
questions of us?
I appreciate your and the board's support of the open space program, and I hope I have the honor of continuing to serve. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan, and thanks for your service on the board and taking your years of expertise to put in good use for the charitable purposes on the Open Space Committee. Well done. All right, Mr. Fry, John. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How you doing?
I'm staying dry.
Well, I think we're going to get it, if the newspaper's right, get an inch and a half today. Is that right? Yeah, inch and a half of rain, maybe?
Hopefully we get a lot of snow and we powder skiing.
Got my vote. I cheated and went Monday. So, all right. John, we ask all the same questions of all the applicants. We have two members applying for reappointment, and Mr. Woodrum pulled his application. So we have three. One, I want to start off and ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the Open Space Committee and what's your vision for it. Just go from there if you can. And let me compliment you on your resume too. I was telling that to Mr. Welch earlier. You have an impressive resume.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, go. I'm sorry.
Good to go? Well, I grew up in the Lake Tahoe area, and my family's lived in the Lake Tahoe, Carson Valley area for well over 50 years. I've had the opportunity to enjoy the outdoor areas, when it was much fewer people. I remember Lake Tahoe when I could ride a horse from Ebrights down to Nevada Beach, and Scotty's Hardware used to be on the boardwalk right off the beach, and now none of that's available. And when I was thinking about the committee and what kinds of things they do, I had memories of if somebody would have had the foresight to think about open space and what kinds of things could have been done back then, it would be a whole different way of enjoying the lake. I've seen the Carson Valley change through growth, through development, and it's such a beautiful place. Open space should be enjoyed by all, should be conveniently accessed. I know my family, we've had the opportunity to hike, hunt, and fish in Nevada for many years, and I know as I grow older, I look forward to ways that I can access the open space in ways that as I age, that convenience.
You're looking for the open space to keep you younger.
There you go.
All right.
So yeah, as far as my vision is, I think that open space is the discussion and the involvement and the transparency about how our space is used. It's limited. And I think that as I become more involved in the Carson community. What got me going was I started riding my bike up Ash Canyon and riding on those mountain bike trails. And, the open space committee has just done a wonderful job developing that. And so I think that I'd like to have some involvement in some of those activities and decisions that are affecting the community.
Well, thank you, John. You're very well spoken. Thank you. Stacy?
All right, John, thank you for applying. Tell me how you will go about evaluating the use of limited funds as it pertains to spending money on land acquisition versus managing existing open space.
Well, I think the funds are always limited, but open space is limited as well. So I think that balance, what serves the many is always, in my mind, the main vision or the main purpose. How we can sustain what we have and ensure that what's on the horizon is realistic. So I think that is something that really requires a collaborative discussion and, feedback from many.
Hello, John. I have a two-part question for you, following up on Stacy's question about the differences between, or the balance between, land acquisition and maintenance. In 2017, the winter of 2017, we had some significant damage to many of our trails from the snow runoff and the flooding. So how do you envision creating an account or a program to ensure that we have the money to fix catastrophic repairs or finish catastrophic repairs to our trails above and beyond general maintenance? And then secondly, how and when do you see us being able to make improvements to the Carson Aquatic Trail?
I'm not sure where your revenue sources are, but I know that community involvement is something that's always there. It's just a matter of how well people can tap it. So when you talk about catastrophic events, that are costly, those hopefully there's a rainy day fund someplace that you can tap into. You certainly don't want to close things down because it can't be repaired. I know that, general maintenance, when the rim trail was in play years ago, the company I work for, we had crews of kids up there working. It was something that we participated in as community service events. I know that those things, with the community involvement for some of the general stuff, maybe can offset some of the expenses that can be set aside for your catastrophic funds. So there's got to be some accounting for how that's dealt with. Again, I'm not sure how you deal with your current revenues and how you're managing those, but I do know that catastrophic events sometimes have a tendency to drain what you have.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for applying. What new ideas or changes would you propose if appointed to this position?
This is my first opportunity to apply for an advisory committee. I think the best thing I could probably do is listen and learn, and go slowly, and do my best to see where I could be most useful. Again, my interest is out of my desire to be more involved. I think that open space is critical to our community and to our state. And so that would be how I would approach that. And to get back to your question, I didn't get a chance to answer about the aquatic trail, so sorry about that.
You want to do it now?
You know, I don't think I don't know enough to answer, but I didn't want to ignore that second part of the question.
We got you. John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A while back, we had a proposal come to us to merge the Open Space Committee with the Parks and Recreation Committee, which are separate, but both under Parks and Recreation as a department. And compromises worked out, and now they meet in joint meetings twice a year, I believe. But on one of those committees, the Parks and Rec, there is a board member representative from this board. And on the other, the Open Space Committee, there is no board member. How do you feel about that? Would you see it as a good idea to have a board member on both, or do you think the current situation works just as well? Because open space is pretty much a sort of a scientific endeavor by those members, and many of them have that background.
I think they're kind of naturally married. The use of land, that multiple use concept is, again, back, it's how best to serve the community and the community interests. Open spaces, I understand, undeveloped areas. But then, there's that overlay in some areas. You want things to be connected and, where possible. And I think it's always better to have people talking and collaborating together than not.
Thank you.
John, is there anything you want to add? There are no right or wrong answers in all this stuff, so don't worry about that. But if there's anything you want to add?
No, this has been my first time, and I thank you for having me.
Very good. Well, we want to thank you again for applying. We'll see where it goes here. These are our toughest decisions we have to make, and I guarantee you, looking at you guys, listening to you folks, and it's tough. Anyway, you're welcome to hang around while we struggle around with how we're going to decide here.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
All right, board, we're here again. Anybody want to, our kind of the unwritten policies, if there's a reappointment, we go down that road to give them a chance to finish their term out, and if they've been doing a good job, they do that. It's not set in stone. My own sense is we've got 3 great applicants here, and the 2 that are applying for reappointment have done a great job on the Open Space Board. So that's kind of where I would lean, but this is a tough decision, so that's just my bit.
Thank you for those words, Mayor. I tend to agree with you. I think that we have shown in several circumstances that when we have people that are qualified and have done a good job on a committee and they ask for reappointment, that we go down that road. We have 3 very qualified candidates. I'm always an advocate for bringing new blood in, but in this particular case, I think that we have 2 members asking for reappointment that have been a very vocal and very needed voice on the committees. And so just based on my scoring system, my vote is going to go to Bruce and Alan first. But I would say, John, that this has happened to us in a lot of circumstances where we have to come back to you and say, you're very qualified, hang in there, come back, we'll get you on there. It may not be today, and I'm only speaking for myself. Obviously, I can't speak for the board. But we've had to do that in several circumstances, and we do eventually get you on there. It just may not be the first go-around when we do it.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
No, I agree with a great deal of that. And John, I echo what Brad just said. You look like a great candidate, but those 2 guys have done a great job. And I would add this, though, listening to the questions at the other end, mine was a process question. Theirs was about outcomes. And I am concerned too because of that limited funding and the need for maintenance. So I would counsel those who stay on the Open Space Committee to go forth and figure out a way to thread that needle, because that maintenance is necessary.
Okay, well, I guess, that makes you and Supervisor Bagwell
We're useless.
useless.
Irrelevant.
They're
I wouldn't say useless, just co-opted.
Yeah, we're
You get to be irrelevant on this one, but the next one, you gotta, okay. All right, we'll entertain a
speak
motion
first.
we'll entertain a motion to reappoint Bruce Scott and Alan Welch, and give our best to John and ask him to please stay in the mix, because as Supervisor Bunkowski said, we'll find a place, we'll find a way to help, okay? We'll do that. And I personally, John, enjoyed your history in Nevada, but you've been around here. It's kind of hard to my mind kept flipping back to those days myself. So thanks for coming and making a pitch here. So on the motion, do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I move to approve Bruce Scott and Alan Welch to the Carson City Open Space Advisory Committee, each for a term that expires in January 2023.
On the motion, discussion, hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried, okay. I didn't see that come up electronic. There it is. Okay, running a little too fast. Thank you again. All right, let's take up the Parks and Rec one.
We may, the candidates.
Wait a minute.
The
Okay.
candidates were told to get here around 2:30, so
We need to take a little
we
break.
need to
They're
take a
nowhere
little
yet.
break until,
is this where you put on a song and dance?
yeah.
All right, board, we'll be in recess for 15 minutes. call our meeting of the Board of Supervisors back to order, and if you were thinking about what we were doing up here talking, we were discussing Supervisor Bunkowski's new idea to create a patch that would make you not want to eat donuts. And I told him,
board meeting.
I ought to told him he ought to go down and sign up at Adams Hub. All right. All right, we're going to take up the last item on our agenda this afternoon. This is to fill 2 appointments to the Parks and Recreation Commission. We have 4 applicants, I believe. 5? 4. 4. 5.
One appointment.
We're down to 4.
4. But we have Dave here, so we're going to start off with Dave. Mr. Whitfield, come on up, Dave.
Lights stay on.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good to see you. And thanks for applying to be on Parks and Rec Board. Parks and Rec Board's in the news here a little bit.
You still want to?
I'm not going to ask you about it, but you want to withdraw your application?
Yeah.
Good, no.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, Dave, we always ask the same question. I don't think we ask the same questions, and of all the applicants, nobody gets an upper hand or leg up or whatever they want to call that. But I'm going to start off and just kind of get you warmed up a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the Parks and Rec Commission, and what's your vision for what you'd like to do.
Is that better? Okay. My name's Dave Whitefield. I've been a resident of Carson since 2009. I moved to the area in 1998. My first association with Carson City was in June of '80 when I came up for a seminar on my first day of work for Mr. Bentley. And I worked 18 years in the field organization, various locations, Southern California and Arizona, and came up in '98 to join their product development group and advise on some of the electronics and try to put some of the field experience, some of my field experience into their electronic products. Lived in Gardnerville and Minden until 2009 and moved up here, and really like it here in Carson, and retired from Bentley GE in December of 12. And I've been having quite a bit of fun since then, traveling, and first one thing and another, got involved in this funny sport called pickleball a couple of years ago, thanks to the MAC, and got to meet Scott Chapman and Dan, and just got more interested in trying to maybe give back something to the community that's given me a lot, and so my primary interest in Parks and Rec concerns racket sports, because that's kind of my avocation since I was young. I played tennis since I was 10 years old, and played at university, and got so old I couldn't cover the court anymore, and pickleball has kind of reignited my enthusiasm for racket sports. And my wife and I do quite a bit of traveling. We've got 8 children between us and 14 grandchildren, so we're all around the country and seeing different facilities, different parks, different cities, how they run their organizations, and have been really enthused about this sport in particular, but primarily because it serves so many, such a large part of the population. I mean, from youth to families to seniors can really enjoy this sport. Unlike tennis, tennis takes quite like golf, takes a while to master and get really good at. Pickleball, you can kind of put a paddle in somebody's hand, in 5 or 10 minutes you can have them playing the game and enjoying themselves. So, and it's very good exercise, and it's just a wonderful sport. We've made a lot of good friends. I've probably got between 200 and 300 new friends that I've met over the past 2 years in this sport. So really enthused about it. I recently became an ambassador for the U.S. Pickleball Association, and my mission there is to promote the sport. So
You're doing a good job.
thanks. I thought about bringing a paddle and a ball in case you don't know what it is. Anybody?
Yeah, we know what pickleball is.
You know what pickleball is. You have one of the, I mentioned we've traveled a lot. I've played in a number of places. You have probably the finest indoor facility that I've seen in all my travels. So the MAC is a wonderful place. I'm very excited to promote that and get more people down here playing at the MAC. So yeah, it's really nice. I think we're lacking in some outdoor facilities. I was just in St. George, Utah last week, and they have a number of outdoor facilities, one of which is it's the Little Valley Pickleball Park. There's 24 outdoor courts. I was there on a Wednesday morning. All the courts were full and there were people waiting. There were over 100 people. It was 39 degrees, and there was 100 people waiting. Are playing and waiting to play. So it's a really good activity. It's not my only interest, but I'm very passionate about it and enthused about it. There's a lot that I don't know about the city of Carson and the parks and the departments, but I'm a pretty quick study, and I'd really think I would enjoy working with the board and with the Parks and Rec people, getting to know more of them.
Well, if you work for GE Bentley, we know that there's nothing, you got to be on top of your game to work there. So,
Well, thank you.
yeah. And I would, and I know, you're doing indoor pickleball, but I don't want it to be overlooked that Jennifer Budge back there says that she's going to repave all of our tennis courts, and she's got the money for all that, and everybody is just really happy about that.
I'm very excited.
She doesn't really, but I'm
Happy right now.
Wow, when did that happen?
She doesn't have all, but I raise that issue because we are aware that, our tennis courts need some help.
Right.
It's a priority issue. I mean, these issues on how we, when spending taxpayer money, it is taxpayer money, and so you have to prioritize where that goes and
Right.
get the greatest good for you can. So anyway, you're very well spoken, and want to thank you for coming to Carson City.
Well, thank you.
All right. You're welcome to sit down and listen. The rest of us, these are hard decisions.
We got to do the whole interview.
Oh, shoot, I already did it for you. Right there. Good, Stacy.
There you go.
All right,
No more questions.
Dave, thanks for applying. I'm interested to know, some communities do an Adopt a Park program.
Yes.
And I'm curious to know what you would see as the key points in making a program like that work if we were to start one here.
Oh, for my interest, particularly for the pickleball interest, or just in general?
No, just in general.
In general.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been doing a little bit of snooping since I got interested in this opening, and I've been to a couple of the, several of the parks with courts, and I see generally, maintenance needed, and I think, I noticed this when I was in Minden as well. The tennis courts aren't used as much. I mean, tennis has kind of died out a little bit, and they're not being used as much for tennis play. And you can put, 2 tennis courts will hold 6 pickleball courts. So instead of a possibility of 4 people playing at a time on, 4 or 8 people on 2 tennis courts, you got 24 people in the same space. So in terms of efficiency of space use, and I just think it's a lot, it's got a lot going for it. And several of the, like I said, several of the courts aren't even in good enough shape to have tennis nets up. So I think there's a lot of deferred maintenance there that could be addressed.
Hello, Dave. Generally, as a rule of thumb, we ask fairly broad questions here,
Right.
but I'm going to zero down into a microscopic detail,
Okay.
and it has nothing to do with pickleball.
Okay. Darn.
So we have 30-plus community parks in Carson
Right.
City, playground equipment on those parks. And Jen, don't hold me to any of these numbers, I'm just rounding in my head. Playground equipment can cost $250,000 for one set of playground equipment for universally acceptable
no
playground
idea.
equipment.
Wow.
That's $7.5 million in round numbers of playground equipment. This is one line item in the Parks and Rec budget. If we need to replace that playground equipment on an average every 10 years, that's 3 sets of playground equipment a year, $750,000 just in replacing playground equipment. Those are big numbers, and that's one line item. So give me your thoughts on thinking outside the box. As a committee member, how do you work through the process of determining priorities, public safety versus cost versus different maybe kinds of playground equipment or Just give me your thoughts on that.
Sorry. I didn't realize it went off, sorry. From my background at GE and Bentley, I think we kind of had a mantra, if you can't measure it, you don't know what you're doing, right? Because if you can't measure it, you don't know what kind of improvement you might make or how you might make that improvement. So I think probably the first thing I would address would be some type of data collection effort to find out what the actual usage is. I'll go back to I'm going to revert back to pickleball for a minute. At the MAC, everybody buys cards and we go in and we scan in every day. But there's not even a field in the database to tell us what activity you're engaged in. So we don't know. I don't believe, Dan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that there's even any data that supports, how many basketball players, how many soccer players, how many pickleball players. And I would see the same kind of thing with the park facilities. I think you'd have to make some measurements and find out what the usage is, and then try to set priorities from that.
You snatched my question there. Darn it. I'm like, let me see if I can come up. Yes, it's almost word for word. I was like, he looked at my paper. Okay, I'm teasing.
No cheating.
I thought you were working on that patch. We were really looking at the paper.
That's,
You don't realize that Brad can read minds.
That's right. He's good. He's good. Let's see. There's several duties that the Park and Rec Commission has. And so one of those is the recommendation of policies on park and recreation services. So I'm going to ask that same question to everybody. On yours, though, I'm going to ask you to exclude pickleball.
Okay.
Because, again, I'm interested in, are there services that we should be providing that we're not, besides pickleball more? So what do you think?
Well, I certainly suspect that there are. I don't have any preconceived notions about what they would be or what we might do to address those. But so I would just approach that open-mindedly and say, let's look at the situation and see what we have and what we don't have and what people are asking for that maybe is not being served right now, and go from there.
Do you ever, as a follow-up, do you ever believe services should be reviewed to determine if we should continue
Yes, I
to
do.
provide them?
I do.
So both? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. I will take up some time by asking 3 questions, but they'll be brief. First of all, I have a process question, which I asked the people who are seeking the open space. We have 2 committees under Parks and Recreation. One is open space and one is Parks and Rec, which is the urban envelope type parks. And there is a Board of Supervisors member on one of them, the Parks and Rec.
Right.
And there is none on the open space. How do you feel about, do you think that's a good idea? Should there be one of us on both or none on either, or how do you feel?
Well, I'm going to work a little bit from ignorance here because I haven't seen the process, take place here. But I'm assuming that I'm assuming you guys have interest in what takes place in each one. So I would see value in having a member on each one.
Thank you. I'm also working from ignorance, but that's just a long-standing policy of mine. Secondly, you said something, and this is what added the third question, about you travel a lot now that you're retired. Is that going to conflict with the meetings that you have to go? Because we like the people we put on these committees to go to them.
Right. No, I think not. We're off, if we're traveling, we go see the kids or the grandkids and come back. It's not, it's unusual for us to be gone more than, a week at a time.
Thank you. And finally, again, I'm going to do what my colleagues have done, excluding pickleball, which I can see you're passionate about, and I commend you for that. Tell me your top proposal that you would bring to the Parks and Recreation Commission to tackle if you can get them to go along with you.
Well, again, I'm speaking as you mentioned, from ignorance, but I really think a data collection effort to find out how the facilities are actually being used and what we might be missing, I think those would be probably my top priority.
Good repetition.
Okay.
Dave, is there anything you want to add? Any questions of us?
Well, I guess I was in a meeting with the ambassadors the other day, the USAP ambassadors, and I'm new to that organization as well, so I'm kind of volunteering on several levels. But I met a fellow who was worked in Parks and Rec in Reno for 30 some odd years before he retired, and he's been on the advisory board up there. And so I was asking him, I told him I was applying for this, and I said, how did you find your work in that capacity? And he said, frustrating. I said, well, explain that. And he said, well, we did a lot of advising, but there very little of that advice was taken. So I guess my question of all of you would be, how much do you depend on the advisory commission, and how do you feel about the advice that's given to you?
I think I can speak for the board on this one, and we all have our independent views, but I think, it's our position that our boards and commissions that we appoint to are key to the community. They vet issues before they come to us. They're a very valuable portion of how decisions are made in this community, and, we do try our best to, one, respect their decisions and, follow them if we can, but we expect them to do their due diligence and present us with, with what their best recommendation is, and with the understanding that we appreciate their work and count on it. So I think that's the way we all feel up here.
Being as Lori is on that Parks and Rec, maybe she could also add to any answer you gave. Good answer, Mayor.
I think the challenge in the Park and Rec environment is when you sit on a committee that has a specific charge. So I'm going to work on park and recreation issues, is you want it all. And I'm going to assume that's more where his frustration is you're trying to solve all of the issues within the park and rec environment, and yet this board has to deal with balancing each and every board's requests and ideas. And so I think one of the great things in Park and Rec over the last few years, though, is they have learned to come together and really limit their ask so that it's heard better. If that's a good way to say it, that we're getting really good at saying, hey, here's our 2 priorities, instead of here's my list of 500 capital items that we need. And that's a really hard challenge for Park and Rec commissioners, because again, we want to solve it all, right? I do want the playground, but I want to fix the roof or the swimming pool. I want it all. And so to learn to just go to those top 2 priorities, then this board has a much better option of meeting that request.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Not that I will overdo it. I'd like to invite you all to come to the MAC someday and try out pickleball, because it's very addictive, and I think you will very quickly
Do we get a free pickle if we do?
You just might get a free pickle. Thank you for the opportunity.
Now you can sit around and wait.
Thanks for advertising the MAC.
Yeah, and I apologize for my board members for trying to cut them out. Don't do that on purpose.
No problem.
But now you can wait. Now you can sit and listen if you'd like to do that, or you don't have to if you don't want to.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to apply and for your consideration.
You bet. All right. All right.
And by the way, Mr. Mayor, you never have to apologize to us.
Oh.
You are our leader.
No, I don't know.
Thought maybe he was going to organize a pickleball game of us versus, senior citizens that he has playing with him.
Hello, Christopher. How are you doing?
Doing well, sir. How are you doing?
Good. Have a seat up here.
Thank you.
One, we want to thank you for applying for the Parks and Rec Commission position. We have 4 applicants today, and we always ask the same questions. You'll get questions from all of us. We ask the same questions of every applicant, so nobody gets a leg up. And so to start off, I'd just like to ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself, why you want to be on the Parks and Rec Commission, and what your vision for that commission is.
My name is Chris Pattison. Currently, I'm a pawnbroker at Capital City Loans in Carson City. I have 3 kids, and my main goal of joining the Parks and Rec Commission is to do my best for their future to keep parks open and free for everybody, especially my kids.
Okay. All right. Go.
Okay, Chris. Okay, to call you Chris or Christopher? Chris, thank you very much for applying. Some communities around the country do and adopt a park program similar to the Adopt a Highway program. And I'm interested to know what would you see as key points to making a program like that work if we were to do something like that here in Carson City?
Marketing is probably the most important source to do it. Of course, social media plays a good role in that, but getting the information out there to the people and letting them know that's available. Something similar to what the trail system is doing right now, which I think is just a great way to go about it.
Hello, Chris. Generally, when we're up here and we're interviewing people, we ask fairly broad questions, but in this particular case, I've decided to go down to a microscopic detail in the Parks and Rec budget because I want to get an idea of what your thought process is. Okay. So picking one item out of the Parks and Rec budget is playground equipment at our parks. So there's 30 plus community parks in Carson City, and I'm just picking fairly round numbers here, but they're in the ballpark. A set of playground equipment can cost $250,000. So over 30 parks, that's $7.5 million. If we have to replace that playground equipment once every 10 years, that's 3 sets a year. That's $750,000 a year that we need to set aside for playground equipment replacement. So give me your thought process. If you're looking at the budget, you're on this committee, and you're having to make priority decisions about where money gets spent. Do you look at alternative types of playground equipment? Do you look at, give me your thought process. How do you handle a situation like that where you're trying to prioritize and make sure that we are doing everything that we can to have universally acceptable playground equipment, to make everything accessible, and to spread that benefit across the whole city?
Excellent question. As a pawnbroker, I like doing everything as cheap as I possibly can anyhow. First, sourcing the equipment, finding the least expensive source while still maintaining safety standards for the children is priority on that. After the equipment is sourced, finding crews to install it. Doing an open request for installation from contractors is usually, I assume is how it's done. I've never been a member of a government organization before. But finding the least expensive place while still maintaining safety, I think, is the priority with that. Then go from there.
Good afternoon. One of the responsibility of the Parks and Rec Commission is to make recommendations on policies for parks and recreation services. How would you go about doing that? To make recommendations on park and recreation services, on what services we provide.
Well, I like I said, I've never done anything like this before, but I would assume that there was some sort of setup on organizational chart of how you put in recommendations. Just like when I was in the Air Force, if I had something, I wouldn't go just over everybody's head. I go to my commander just above me and make a recommendation to them and then go from there. I'm assuming it's probably something similar in the system in town, correct?
Let me try a little bit here. So we provide lots of recreation services. We have a theater, we have a swimming pool, we have a bunch of playgrounds, we have lots of things that we do. Maybe we would you ever consider discontinuing a recreational service?
Most definitely not. I want as many recreational services as possible, especially, like I said, I have 3 kids of my own that are involved in, yeah, you know what kids, they're involved in everything. And I want there to be as much available to the public as possible, especially kids.
I'm going to ask you 3, but they'll be quick questions. One is, this is a process question. We have both a Parks and Rec Commission, which you're applying for, and there's an Open Space Committee also under Parks and Rec for the outside the urban envelope. The Open Space Committee has no Board of Supervisors member sitting on it as a liaison, but the Parks and Rec has a member, it happens to be Lori. How do you feel about that? Do you think there should be one on both, or none on either, or as it is existing now?
Well, I think it's great that Lori's on both of those, but...
No, she's just on the one, that's what I mean.
Oh.
She serves on Parks and Rec, but not on Open Space. There is no board member on Open Space. I wasn't clear, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think if one of the supervisors has enough time to be a member on it, that'd be phenomenal. But time is of the essence, and you guys are spread pretty thin as it is with all the different boards that you're on.
You just hit the nail on the head, although there are no right answers here. Secondly, do you have any conflicts that might make you miss meetings?
No, currently I don't. I was previously search and rescue, and at that time I had no free time, but since I just stopped doing that to free myself up, and that's why I'm here. I want something else, and I don't have any conflicts at this time.
Finally, what would be the top proposal that you would bring to the table with the commission, knowing, of course, that they might have other things they want to do that you would sell to them as something that should be advised to us?
My main goal is to try and keep as many of the parks, and all of them, open and free. As much of our land as possible open and free in and around Carson City. That's what I want to do. I think some of you guys know what's going on with the range, and I'm just worried that that's the way the whole city may be going, and I want to do what I can, if I can do anything about it, to keep as much land open.
I'm sorry, what do you mean, that's the way the city, that we're going to have to close things, or what?
No. That's just, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that was just one of my personal concerns, that if that is a direction that the city ever wants to go into, I want to be involved and help keep that from happening, to keep as much of the land open and free to the people as possible. Yes, sir.
Board? Chris, thank you. Any questions you got of us?
No, sir, I don't think so.
Okay, well, we all want to thank you for applying, and you're welcome to stay in the room now and listen to the rest of the interviews if you want to do that. And I think, let me just say, on behalf of all of us, thanks for your service to the United States Air Force.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
All
sir.
right, you bet. Who is next here? Nathan? Okay.
Who's not coming?
Okay.
Hi, Nathan. How you doing this afternoon? Good. Come on up and have a seat in the middle there. It's not a hot seat either. It's just a good seat.
Nope, not hot.
Yeah, good. Nathan, thanks for applying to be on the Parks and Rec Commission. We all ask the same questions so that nobody gets a different leg up. And at the end, if you want to say anything or ask us questions, feel free to do that. There are no right or wrong answers. It's even though, it looks like it's kind of it's an interview in fact, but it's informal. So don't be intimidated if you would be, if you are. We're just interested in hearing about you, what your thoughts are, and what you want to do for Parks and Rec in your commission, in your city. So I'm going to start off and ask you just to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on this commission and what your vision for it is.
My name's Nathan. Do I need to press the button? Or?
Yeah, press it so the light goes on. Then when you finish talking, turn it off. So.
Okay. My name's Nathan Marcucci. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I have 2 kids, a 2.5-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I actually currently live in over by Mark Twain in that neighborhood. And I moved here probably like 2.5 years ago. I don't know, I'm just really civically minded. So I like public service, and I just want to be more involved in my community. So that's mostly why I like to be involved in my community.
Okay. And do you have any specific thoughts on a vision for what Parks and Rec should be doing, or what you'd like to see it do?
As a stay-at-home dad with a small kid, I see a lot of park equipment that I know that I've talked to the park supervisor before. It just seems like there's a lot of park equipment or parks that are not exactly the best taken care of, and I don't know. I'd like to be able to utilize the ones that are closer to my house a little bit better instead of driving. It's nice to walk. Currently, Blackwell's Pond is pretty good, but the one Sunland Vista, it's closed off, and Mills Park, that's pretty close to my house as well. But it's not a park that I really take my daughter to, especially since I haven't checked in a while. But some of the playground equipment's not exactly the best there. I don't know. I'd just like to see the park equipment mostly be more usable. So, and just to be safer, I guess.
Good. All right. Stacy?
All right, thank you, Nathan, for applying. Appreciate it. Some communities do an Adopt a Park program, similar to an Adopt a Highway program. And I'm wondering if we did something like that here, what would you see as being the key in making that program work?
So I have a question. Every time I press this button, does it turn off, or how's this work? Just keep it red. Okay, so basically, for Adopt a Park program, those kind of things generally take community involvement, and sometimes, so in my experience, that takes parents knowing about it. And my generation, well, I'm just going to put this out there. I'm about 38 years old, so my generation uses social media a lot, and so it's how we get around. It's how we know things. I don't really like social media. I'd really like to delete Facebook, but and I know that's how the community talks to each other, but at the same time, that's how we communicate. So, in a sense, the social media aspect is important part, but getting the community involved and doing things that the community is interested in, for people with little kids, it could be just simple things just as easy as, finding something to do with like a group that, they stick their hands in. I don't know what it is with little kids and slime. It's gross, but for some reason they love it. Or, just find ways to get kids of different ages involved in the community. It's not like a lot of times I see it's mostly sports, but not everybody's interested in sports. I don't know. It's just find what they're interested in.
Nathan, I think you're going to love my question.
Okay.
I'm going to drill down into the minutia of the Parks and Rec budget, and I'm just looking for your thought process. So, playground equipment.
Okay.
Which you already mentioned. We have 30-plus parks in Carson City. A set of playground equipment can cost $250,000. For 30 parks, that's $7.5 million. If we have to replace a set of playground equipment every 10 years, that means that we have 3 sets of playground equipment per year that we would need to replace, meaning that we would need to allocate $750,000 a year towards playground equipment replacement. These are big numbers. What I'm looking for is your thought process in, if you're working on the Parks and Rec budget and you're faced with trying to come up with this money, how do you go about analyzing that? Do you look for alternative ways to provide recreation for kids? Do you just go through the process in your mind and let me know how you would handle that?
Okay, so that's a good question, and I appreciate that question as well, because I understand I've worked in public government before, and I understand that budgets are something that have to balance out. So I understand where the city has money coming in, but they only have a limited amount of money coming in, and they generally, there's not really any ways to make any more money unless you raise taxes, basically, and nobody's really fond of that. So in that regard, some things, like, I don't know, I see that we are building new stuff, but we have a hard time maybe like taking care of the stuff we already have. And so maybe like take care of the stuff we already have before putting money towards other things. It's good to have that kind of stuff. But at the same time, again, going back to things that, that the community is interested in, there's things that don't cost a lot that can be done. I'm not there's another town that I lived in, there was a group that, I forget what they're called, but basically it was for people with kids under, the Parks and Rec. They basically had a lady that all she would do is she would work with little kids, and it was like just sensory stuff. It doesn't cost a lot. You just go buy a bag of flour and again, the slime thing, I don't know what the slime is, where you stick your hands, I don't know why kids like sticking their hands and stuff. It's gross, but it doesn't cost a lot. So, there's things like that, but find out what parents, find out what motivates parents, and find out ways that they can, maybe not necessarily, things come at a cost. So this way, maybe find out what parents can pitch in as well. As a stay-at-home dad, I'd be more than willing to pitch in, but I don't know of all the opportunities. But again, I just barely found out that I could go swimming with my kid. I didn't know about that until Halloween, and I saw a flyer in the community center. That wasn't something that I thought was very well, something that was very well put out, I guess. As far as I understand, that's free. So that's kind of cool. I don't know. Just free things for families. Free things go a long way. Does that make any sense? I guess I don't know. Sometimes I get really ahead of myself.
It's like I said, no right or wrong answers, and
yeah,
it's not anyway.
And you're right. Free is good.
Free. Well, lots of people like free, and it's when you say free, or especially when there's people that are civically minded and they're willing to put forth the effort. Those are the kind of things that are important to me. I don't know. To me, you live in the community, you should be part of the community. You should put forth the effort to do something for your community as well. Whether I don't know. It's just my opinion, I guess. Anyway,
It's a good opinion.
So
Supervisor Bagwell.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
One of the duties and responsibilities of members of the Park and Rec Commission is to recommend policies on the services, the recreation services that are provided. How would you go about doing that?
Policy's never been something that I've been really strong about, but I do know that there. The best way I could say that would probably be to just see what's already there, what's working, what's not. Sometimes new people come in and they want to change things right away, but maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong. But how do you know until you experience it for a little bit? And then, I don't know, when I was in the Army, the phrase was shoot, move, and communicate. So basically, plan your strategy and see how it's going to go. But
Is a little bit of a follow-up. Would you ever recommend a recreational service be discontinued?
it depends on the service, such as, what are you thinking?
I'm not giving you the idea.
Okay.
I'm just looking to objectively what criteria you might use to make the decision on
Well,
whether
okay,
a program
in that
should-
case, is it useful? Is the community using it? I mean, if the community is not using it, is it really worth that time? What is the cost versus the benefit to the community, I guess, is something I would look at.
I'm going to ask a process question first. The Parks and Recreation has two committees, actually. The one you're applying for, Parks and Rec, and the other one is the Open Space Committee for the Parks and Rec stuff that's outside the urban envelopes for basically passive recreation in most cases. On the Parks and Rec Commission, there is a board member from this board who is a liaison and a representative. It happens to be Lori to my right. But secondly, the Open Space does not have a board member. Do you have any feeling about whether there should be a board member on each, a board member on neither, or just continue the way it is?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you repeat it a little bit louder as well?
Sure. The Open Space Committee and the Parks and Recreation Commission are under the Parks and Recreation Department and work with them. One has a board member sitting on it, the Parks and Rec, the one that you're applying for, and that's Lori. But the other, the Open Space, does not. Do you have any feeling on whether that's the right way to go, or whether there should be one on each, or no board member on either?
I'm not really sure how to answer that, especially since this would be my first board position to be applied for. But again, if it's working out, or depends, I mean, there's things to consider, such as, is there a conflict of interest? If there is, then maybe that's something to look at. If there's not, you know, I mean, like, how does it benefit the community is something to think about. You know, is that what the community wants?
My mother taught me, if you don't know, it's a good answer, and that's a good answer. Thank you. Do you have any conflicts that would make you miss meetings?
As far as I read, it's Thursday nights, and I don't have anything to do Thursday nights.
Okay, and third, what is the top proposal you would bring to your fellow commissioners as an idea the city should get involved in, or improve, or whatever?
Like I was talking about earlier, probably just, you know, get the community more involved. Probably, you know, free is good. Just, you know, I think I've met a few other stay-at-home dads. There's not many of us. There's probably 3 in town. But, you know, I'm sure there's like a mom's club. I know that where I used to live, my wife used to go to the mom's club, and they used to do lots of free things. And those are the kind of people that really want to know about the you know, free is good, because they have kids. And so, you know, just find things that are free that the community can get behind. Just, you know, I mean, as far as I understand, Carson City is about 50,000 people-ish. You know, it's not a big city, it's not a small city, but at the same time, there's a lot we can do. There's a lot of diversity in the city, so.
Thank you.
Nathan, is there anything you want to ask us? Any concluding comments you want to make?
No, I like the city, and so that's part of the reason that I applied for this job. So, I mean, I plan on living here for a very long time.
Let me ask you just one question. And your degrees conferred, you mentioned a degree. It's called an EDD.
No, I don't know.
It says a bachelor's, master's. Oh, maybe that's.
I do have a degree, but it's not. I don't know what EDD is.
All right. I don't know if that was typed in or what. Okay. No problem. But I got one other question for you. Who's taking care of your daughter now?
My wife is at home right now. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Good. It's good to hear from a stay-at-home dad. That's good. That's
Yeah.
all right. All right. Any other questions, board? You're welcome to sit and listen, and thank you again on behalf of all of us for applying, and thank you for your comments that, you know, you're part of this community, and you're willing to step up. That's good stuff. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, and I hope that I get the opportunity to serve. So thank you.
These are difficult decisions for us. So.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, John.
Doctorate of Education, yeah. Education doctorate.
Good afternoon. How you doing today?
I'm doing real well.
That's good. That's good. Turn that red light on there. Just push the button in front of you there on that little thing. There you go. That's it. Let me say thank you on behalf of all of us for applying to serve on the Parks and Rec Commission. And we appreciate your interest in helping make our community a better place to live, work, and in this instance, recreate and play. We always ask the same questions of all the applicants. If I'm not speaking loud enough, you let me know. I got the same problem as you do. So we always ask the same questions, and there's no right or wrong answer. Just want to know what your thoughts are. So I'm going to start off by asking you a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to serve on the Parks and Rec Commission, and what do you think your vision for that commission is?
Well,
push the button again, John. That red, push the button in front of you again there. So, yeah, so that red light's...
Do I keep it on?
Yeah, leave it on, yeah.
As a young man, I grew up and my family was always very aware of giving back to the community, working with other people and doing something good. So I was brought up that way. Starting in my undergraduate years, one of my minors in college was recreation coaching. And from there, I went back to Aberdeen, Washington, taught in the high school, and for two summers there, I was the recreation director for the city of Aberdeen. I left there to went back to school and got a master's degree, and finished all of my classwork except for dissipation for my doctors. Moved to Carson City and took a position as an educational consultant for the state of Nevada. Worked there for 20 years. During that time, I applied and was selected for the Parks and Recreation this was back in the 70s. Anyway, I worked 20 years here at the Department of Education, moved down to California and stayed down there for some 25, 26 years. And family decided I was time for me to move back up to Carson City. And reading the paper one day, I saw an ad that said that they were looking for volunteers for the Park and Recreation. And I said, well, that's something that I can do. Number one, I got the time. Number two, I'm interested in providing some service. And number three, I've read many times where a person, if he keeps his brain working and he does things, he stays younger longer. And so I decided, well, going back to when I was on the Park Recreation Commission, we were instigators in the first to getting Eagle Valley Golf Club started. And I always found that to be very rewarding. And so I thought, reading that article in the paper, I thought, well, hey, here's a chance to give back to the community, which has always been treated me very well. And so that's why I did it.
Okay. Stacy, go ahead.
All right, John, thank you for applying. We appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Just a little bit.
Okay.
I'm a little hard of hearing.
That's okay. Some communities do an adopt a park program, and I'm curious to know what you think would be a key to making a program like that work if we were to start one here in Carson City.
Well, that's not being, I've only lived up here now for a little over a year, okay? So I'm not aware of everything that's going on. So I would have to say that to really make a decision or to make recommendations, I would need to come across more information to see what the rest of the members of the commission feels and how they work and what the goals and the opportunities are.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, John. I'm looking for your thought process on a particular, what I'm going to do is go into very minute detail of the Parks and Rec budget. And I'm just looking for your thought process on this situation. So for playground equipment, Carson City has 30-plus community parks. If the parks all have playground equipment, a set of playground equipment can cost $250,000. So over 30 parks, that's $7.5 million in playground equipment. If we need to replace the playground equipment once every 10 years, then that's 3 sets of playground equipment per year, $750,000 a year that we would need to allocate for playground replacement. So give me your thought process. If you're looking at the Parks and Rec budget, tell me how you prioritize and work through this to ensure that we're setting aside either enough money to replace the playground equipment, or do you go out and look for alternative means of recreation in the parks? Just give me your thought process on how you handle that situation.
You're going to have to, as you said, evaluate the money that's going to be spent on replacing these parks. But also along with that, you got to be aware of what is needed. Are there any alternatives that could take the place without a lot of money being involved? Not knowing how much or where your money comes from, it's kind of hard to say that, you know, that things need. Which is most important? Definitely, we have to make sure that the parks, the playground, the activities are safe for the children. And if every 10 years they need to be replaced, that's something that has to be considered as number one priority, the safety of it. But also, as a member of, say, of a commission, one should be aware of, can we look and can we go out and get a feel from the community of what other alternatives might be available? Can we put these two together and make them work, possibly lower the budget, or maybe we would have to go along with the budget and try to work in the other activities somewhere along the line, depending on what the need is.
Good afternoon, John. One of the responsibilities of the members of that commission is to do policies on park and recreation services. So how would you go about recommending which services to provide?
You would have to, I would have to have a goodly amount of information at my fingertips to be able to read and talk, discuss it with the rest of the members and the board, maybe even ask some people, the citizens of the city, what they think of things like this. Because without the backing of your population, things are not going to work real well, and they look to us as being their leaders. But I have found over the years, leaders need to get input before they can go out and make great big decisions, and that surely helps the rest of the members of the board and yourself in coming up with these answers.
So would you ever recommend the discontinuance to stop a service?
Say that again?
Would you ever recommend to stop a service?
To stop the service?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think so, because if the service is there, it must have been a reason, and some people must have thought that there was a need for it at that time. And until I would say, if I was in that position, I would have to go back and check the history or see what our goals and objections are right now before you could recommend that things stop or even stop or change or whatever the case might be. You can't just arbitrarily say, you know, you've got to have input to make that decision.
My first question is a process question and a little education at the first point. The Parks and Recreation Commission is the one you're applying for, but under the Parks and Recreation Department, there is also an open space committee for the larger tracts of land for passive recreation. The Parks and Rec Commission that you're seeking to go on has a board member from this board that serves on it, and that happens to be Lori at the moment. And but the open space does not. I'm wondering if you think that should remain that way, or if we should take board members off, both of them, or put a new one on the open space committee.
Well, I saw some of that. I saw some of that when I was going online, trying to pick up some information. I think for any commission to function in its proper way needs to have someone that they can run ideas, get input, output, so that can help them, and maybe, be able to go, okay, I can go to you and say, look, here's an idea I have. What do you think of it? Is it possible? Do you see as it a concept that would work? No, I don't. Okay, fine. Next month, or 2 months from now, I got another one. And at the same time, that person is telling the commission, hey, look, we've got a consensus. We would like to have you look and go into the possibilities of these ideas. So I think it's real important that you have a go-to within any commission, somebody that you can work with, somebody that's willing to listen to you and either say yes or no. Granted, everything that you come up with is not going to be acceptable, but if you don't have some ideas, if you don't work towards the betterment of the community and you have somebody to run these through, you're just sitting there. Nothing is happening. And the same thing, you've got another member. I think it's with the parks, the fellow with the parks. I'm not sure of this, but when I was on this commission way back, there was a Mr. Sullivan, I believe was his name. And we worked real well with him. He was my neighbor. And we had ideas that went in, and it was great, and we started with his authorization and his backing. I was able to start the first slow pitch organization in the city of Carson. We played over here.
Congratulations. That's a great history.
You got to have people that you can run your idea, and they got to have people that acceptable to their ideas. And without that too, it's not going to work.
Thank you. A couple other brief questions. Do you have any conflicts that would make you miss any of the meetings that you, if you were?
No, I don't think so. I'm basically semi-retired, so I got more time than money.
Thank you. And a third question, I'm similar. The third question is, what would be the top proposal that you would bring to the commission and say, we ought to do this, that isn't being done yet in Carson City?
Could you repeat that?
Yes. What top proposal, what top idea will you bring to the commission if you were appointed, so that a new idea that might bring something to the community that's not there yet?
Okay, now if I got you right, you're asking me for a recommendation of something we could do.
Yes.
Okay. There's one thing and I found this. I'm a senior citizen, okay, and I don't know what the other members are made up of, but I have a feeling that if there's not a senior citizen on there, it probably wouldn't hurt to have one to represent the senior citizens. I found over here. The last 6 months or so, I went to the community center and had an exercise class in there, and it was funded. But then they lost their funds, and that's something important. So I'm sitting here thinking the other day, there's a couple of things. Number one, in the park out here, maybe there's a possibility, and I don't know if it's there, but I haven't seen it, that you set up a area for senior citizens to come exercise. And you got this little stand here and it says, okay, you do this and this, and then you go to the next step, then the next one. And that would give them some help. The other thing is that I was thinking that maybe the Park and Recreation could set up, because there's a lot of senior citizens out there I use a cane for balance. There's a lot of other ones out there that could possibly use a exercise class put on by the Park and Recreation. Maybe it meets, we'll say 2 days a week for an hour and a half. And you have an instructor, and they try to get you to do things that would help you extend your ability to move agendas. And so that would be something that, that's just one of the little ideas that I had.
Thank you very much.
John, is there anything you want to ask us?
No, I can't say that it is. I mean, I think it's, from what I've seen, things are very good.
Okay. Do you have any concluding comments you want to make?
Well,
You don't have to.
I'll tell you the only, if I should be selected, I would, give you my best. And, I'm a person that believes in recreation and looking out for the community and being able to work within the community and having input that helps someone if that's all possible.
Well, thank you for applying. Your community appreciates that. And thank you for your prior service on the Parks and Rec Board and the softball that got started.
Okay.
Just thank you. And you're welcome, John, to sit and listen, because now we're going to make a decision. We have one appointment. One appointment. So we'll see where that goes. But these are difficult decisions for us.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
Yeah. But, we want you to know if you don't get selected, that you keep your name, that you keep reading about opportunities to serve your city, because, we want to make sure that every demographic interest is taken care of in this community. Okay? And
I understand.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. All right. All right, board. I don't know if I have any suggestions for you today. Anybody want to start?
We could start with Mr. Irrelevant.
Mr. Irrelevant, you want to start this time? You don't have to.
No, I see the wheels of the bus coming right at you. Look, this is a hard decision, as the rest of the board members have said. But in evaluating the four folks, I'm always reminded that in Carson, we have a perception that the only people that get involved are the people who are our age and older. And so I'm excited to see both Chris and Nathan be here, because it represents a younger demographic. And so, that's my druthers. And in that instance, I'm going to support Nathan. That'd be my choice.
Do you want to go next?
You want me to go?
Good.
So, having served on the committee or on the commission, it's important to me that, for me, is to try and fill any gaps, right? Who's got what expertise, who brings what to the table, and is there anything that one of these candidates can fill in an area of expertise that we don't currently have? And so, I can look at, I'm really torn between two. And so I'm torn between Dave, because I think people that bring pure passion to something get a lot of things done. So you look at people from Muscle Powered and stuff like that, but they just tend to drive things and you get more done. And so I'm conflicted over the other issue that you said is we have two that have young kids that are on there. And so I look at Nathan as my other choice, because I think he has the two young kids and he may be able to bring that perspective to the table. So I'm torn between complete passion for something versus maybe just more well-rounded and doesn't have a particular bent towards just pure service and youth. So either Dave or Nathan is a good candidate in my mind.
Well, I'm gonna make this more fun. I have a tie between Dave and John. So now we got John's name in the mix too. So it looks like we have 2 potential votes for Nathan and 2 potential votes for Dave, 1 for John.
Now we
One
have,
for
and
Chris.
now we have one more. I'll make it tough. I'm for Chris, but, so we got no consensus up here.
Well, I don't know if this is a tiebreaker or not, but I was pretty impressed with Dave to start, and so that's where I would end up.
That's 3 for
I
Dave.
think that makes 3 for
3
Dave.
for Dave. Okay.
All right, we'll entertain a motion to appoint Dave.
I move to appoint Dave Whiteman to the Parks and Recreation Commission to fill an unexpired term set to expire January 2022.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Wait a minute, there it is, okay. All right, thanks to all of you for applying. Just, you know, we live in a great community, and the fact we have 4 people applying for one position on the Parks and Rec Board speaks wonders for our community, because we want people we have people in this community who know or who want to serve and make Carson City better. So for all of you, if you didn't get selected, keep your eyes and ears open, because we like people who want to come in and make our community go. And you guys have all done well in your interviews, so thank you very much. All right? All right. All right, is there anything else to come before the board? Are we ready to, we should recess, right, Dan, until 6 o'clock? So we don't have to, or
That's right.
that way I don't have to reconvene at 6 o'clock.
I think
All right.
recess is appropriate.
So
Thank you.
without objection, then, we will recess until 6, when we'll take up a joint meeting with the school board.